God, man. So I wanted to express something about computing that really frustrates me and contributes to my frustration conceptually. Okay, one thing that I really don't like about coding and coders, and as a group of people, I am picky. Like, I'm not gonna throw shade at, C sharp and those people, but really just the way that the developer experience has leaned in the direction of, dynamically typed scripting languages and just-in-time compilation with JavaScript. Now, I want to say something about JavaScript. Now, the defense of it is that it's a mostly compiled language, and rather than just a scripting language, and that it's not very much different. But, you use just-in-time compilation with it, and that ends up being a... Oh, God. Now, I grew up, trying to graft modifications to circle mud with C. I didn't do a great job of it, but I tried, and that's a multi-user dungeon thing, and, I rage quit and I regret it, and I'm trying to make up for lost time on that one, but, when it comes to computers, I look at what's happening in the world of development, right? And I kind of agree with Mental Outlaw and Luke Smith about a lot of this stuff, in that what they said was, essentially... Well, he has a video that's got a provocative title, and it's just there to get people to view it, although when you actually go and pay attention, what he says is a lot more complicated than just the video title. Like, it yields to... Yes, we know, strictly speaking, the video title isn't true, but here, like, is one of the reasons why computers don't seem to be speeding up by as much as they should, and that really is kind of the nature of the frustration. I mean, like, I can only speculate, right, about things like the fact that I don't know that there's a way to properly benchmark it, but it does feel to me like if, scripting languages and shit like Python wasn't becoming so incredibly goddamn popular with developers, and I like Python. I mean, it's but Python is kind of used by somebody like me in the same way that JavaScript was intended way back in 1995 as a lightweight application, sort of thing. But I have watched JavaScript be stretched and pulled over my lifetime into, supporting enterprise level applications that it was never designed for, because its original design goal was to support lightweight programs and web apps, and yet it got stretched to support sites the size of Facebook, which is an enterprise level application, and as a company, they're only thinking about replacing a few parts of, JavaScript with the WSAM, the WebAssembly that can bring Rust into things and, bring a high-performance compiled language to the platform instead of ripping out all the JavaScript, or at least all except the DOM, and putting all WebAssembly into it and compiling it from something like Rust, which is relatively low level, to something like JavaScript. Now, you might say something along the lines of just-in-time compilation, but that's not good enough, And I think that this is one of the core frustrations that I feel. It's like computers have gotten fast enough and everything, but it's because of everything that's happening in the world of front-end development for websites and everything, and the fact that front-end development has been moving. Well, for one thing, it's stagnated. It really has, because you've got two languages that have, effectively dominated the world for a very long time, and while there are myriads of other ones that you can use, they're the future, basically. That future has not arrived yet, and when we look at what people are exploring with them, they're only looking to place the heavier loads on it. They're looking not to replace everything on it, and I'm not satisfied with that. I don't care how heavy the load was or how hot it showed up on your end, on your servers. I want it all replaced from scratch, head to cover, every 100% of it, and JavaScript reduced to the bare minimum that we need to manipulate the DOM, basically. And then when we find a way to manipulate it with the WSAM, we just rip out all of it and kill the language, obsoleting it for good across the web, all websites, and nobody uses a shred of JavaScript ever again. And I would be great with that. And part of what frustrates me to no end is just, you know, I looked at it. I saw it, and I saw that the sandboxing of Firefox used over a gig of RAM. So I run a 16 gigabyte system, and it's not really an issue usually. If you use a computer within fairly benign, uh, if you don't if you're not trying to run a game at the same time as browsing the web, it's not really a big deal. But it starts to become a big deal after a while if you've got too much shit running on your system, and so you have to make these trade-offs all the time in real time, you know, to use a computer, and it really sucks. And the thing is that like 16 gigs is great for like basic operation, but for somebody like me who wants to do the kind of things that I want to do, I really need something more like 32 or 64, on a laptop. And really, like ideally, I'd like a laptop that could go all the way up to 128. Really, I mean, and I mean, it might seem like a lot to you, like you can run a bunch of VMs at the same time, but really, that actually would be ideal from somebody like me to be able to do that sort of thing because, I mean, I'm on the learning path when it comes to computing. I'm going down that rabbit hole in such a huge way, like right now, like presently, I'm going through like free code camps tutorials for JavaScript, even though I have a passionate hatred of it, because what I really need to be able to do is to do, you know, the DOM manipulation part about it, and yet in order to do that, I really need the full, experience and everything with JavaScript. I need to know the language in order to be able to do, and fully understand this, DOM field manipulation stuff. And so that's, that's this course right here is like, so it's about 4 hours of content, and yeah, I'm doing the free code, camp stuff like in JavaScript and going through this stuff, and I probably will after I finish the video, work my way through the JavaScript course. And but I'm just on the warpath at this point, because I've learned a bunch of things, and it means that I won't really need this language. I don't like it. I don't like the implications of it. I don't think that just-in-time compilation is optimized enough. In other words, I don't think it's done enough in that realm. I'm frustrated. I feel like the fact that Moore's law has been a truth has been used as an excuse to neglect runtime performance. I feel that way. When the Nintendo NES was designed, developers were hamstrung by limitations that were artificial. Well, not artificial, but they were the limits of the technology at the time that they were able to build a system. Computers were probably, PCs already existed, but they were nothing. They were nothing like they are today. And the Nintendo Entertainment System had even less power than them, and everything. And when you look at it, they had to write, everything in assembly because it was absolutely paramount that they squeezed every last ounce of performance they could out of the code. And yet, today's world is one in which a developer just wants to get the job done, and that's it. And it just has to be good enough for corporate America in a lot of ways. It doesn't have to meet any sort of high standard and everything. They're not going to hold themselves to. They're not going to bench their code to see if it runs fast. And if they do bench it and it doesn't run fast, they'll just think, oh, Moore's law will make it run fast enough anyways in the future. So fuck it, we don't really care. And I know that there are some people who look at me saying this and think, yeah, I kind of agree with them on this one, But here's the thing that makes me so frustrated about it, which is just those people that think that way are gainfully employed, members of the IT sector. They make a ton of money from it. Their salaries are, north of $60,000 a year. Very quite. Usually it's triple digits, and such for doing it and everything, and it's so incredibly frustrating to realize this about all of it and to see it, in practice and what people are doing and everything, and to know as much about advanced computing as I do, to know that things would run faster if they were written in assembly, hypothetically, they would run, you'd be able to optimize to a much greater extent, if they were, but... I just think that JavaScript's a pile of shit. It's not efficient enough, and I don't know which it is. Is Firefox to blame? Is Chrome and the browser soundbox to blame for the fact that all of this is happening, or is it JavaScript? that is bloating these websites. So even a simple website like, Free Code Camp takes up 200 fucking megs of random access memory. And yeah, I know I could go out and get a stick, and they're not that expensive, but it's still a spend. I don't really hate upgrading computers so much, but that's not trivial, having to shell out over northwards of $1,000 to do it. I love the experience of actually doing it. The whole problem is just that I'm incentivized by everything, and by the reality of the fact that Moore's law is not, it's slowed down, but it's not quite dead. And the people that are doing the innovations in that space are getting very clever and finding workarounds for the fact that, we're reaching hard limits before quantum computing is going to be necessary to speed things up quicker. And the thing, like, that's grinding me about all of this is that they've said for years and years and years and years, Moore's law is a thing, so we don't have to write our code in an optimized way or squeeze out, just try to squeeze out as much performance out of our systems as possible. We don't have to do that. We have to do, we don't have to optimize. Fuck it. If it doesn't run fast, screw it. We don't care. As long as it gets the job done, has been the prevalent attitude about it. And meanwhile, everybody's suffering from computers that, like, for instance, this isn't so bad, right? But this could be way better. You know, this system could be a lot more powerful. Because there is a lot of power in it, but so much of that power is being wasted because of the fact that most of the software that's running on it is not optimized to run in the most efficient way possible on that hardware. It's not tailor built for it. It's not built and it hasn't been optimized for in any way. It's been, if there are things about the code, it's mostly, written to be even readable so that it can be maintained easier if there are anything, updates and everything. And, they aren't very optimized. And the thing is that if they were, we would be able to get so much more out of our computers. And so my frustration is just, like, receptive wisdom about technology is that, a computer in this kind of setting can last for about 5 years of operation before it becomes so slow to use it becomes painful to use. Now, that's a good amount of time with a computer, and that's almost an eternity in the tech space considering how fast things move and improve. But do you realize that if code was run better, if it was more optimized, they might be able to squeeze out another 2 years, 4 years, 5, maybe even another 5? There's no way to really be certain, but it seems to me that, we aren't getting all of the benefits of the speed up that we would because, for instance, when I go in my web browser, most of the web is written in PHP and JavaScript. Not the most efficient way to run code, to say the least. If you know anything about computing, then you already know that the less abstractions there are, the faster it's going to be. And JavaScript is way too abstracted away from the bare metal, so to speak. It's way too far away from and isolated from it to ever really be useful and well, I mean, it can be useful, but it can't be optimized. It can't be optimal. And I think that's what another part of the frustration. Okay, like, in summary, it goes sort of something like this. And, I wrote a poem about it. And, although it was written in a very stream of consciousness fashion, and I said, I've spent the last few years learning obscure facts about the technology that corporate America, like Chuck E. Cheese's, ran on and how it ran on very old hardware. If you were watching John Oliver's show, you probably saw that sort of thing, or The Daily Show. The airplane industries, for the record, the last I checked, still updated their planes by way of floppy diskette, which is really cringe-inducing. The reason why it is this way is the real-world mentality of corporate America is very simple. No, you won't be allowed to improve on that problem because we've already got a solution. Oh, yours solves the same problem but better? Too bad. It'll need to go through extensive QA testing, and we fired all the QA department, So we don't really do quality testing and use our test servers to test very many things anymore. So in essence, if a JavaScript developer gets very defensive about the fact that when they get called out and hit with soy dev as a complaint, or I don't like that term to say it, but I understand what people mean when they say it. And people complain about how badly it solves problems. They'll be like, well, but we solve real world problems, and they'll have to fire back that yes, that's the very problem, now, isn't it? You've taken a legitimate issue and solved it, but implemented a suboptimal solution to the problem. And if I've learned anything about IT and the way IT is applied to corporate America, in summary, I'd state that sometimes all you have to do is introduce a bloated, painfully slow solution to the problem. And if it does technically solve the problem, but at a significant delay, slowly, painfully, frustratingly slowly, then, and in consequence, corporate America will be very adverse to allowing you to upgrade to a truly superior technology in the office, due to the reality that that will take time and man hours to adapt to your in-house solutions, and while you're essentially suffering having to retool things to adapt the rest of your stack, which takes time. Our servers will either be down, or what the time could be better spent, using our IT department and solving newer issues or other issues rather than upgrading to a truly superior solution over the JavaScript that is in our systems. And a way to solve and way of solving and the way of solving problems that are now being solved by JavaScript. So in essence, it becomes an impediment to seeing those problems solved in a better way than they're now being solved, because it managed to get there first. It has a sort of institutional first mover advantage that is now baked into it because of the fact that it got there first. It managed to solve the problem first. So now if something comes along that would solve it in a more optimal fashion, it won't be used, simply because of the fact that there is JavaScript addressing the issue, and it's already addressing it now. And I think that really sucks. It's what makes it really despisable to see this, because there are better ways of building a website that have now emerged through the WebAssembly process, and yet so much has gone into JavaScript that it's now a sunk cost. And a lot of people are engaging in the sunk cost fallacy, basically, in terms of their thinking. We can't rip it out. It's already responsible for so much. It's like we've put so much effort into it, and it's like it is a sunk cost at this point. It's a waste. Everything we've built with it has been a waste. There are now much better ways of building websites, but unfortunately, the way that WebAssembly will be used is only for what runs hot on their servers, basically. So that the highly demanding apps that get dumped on their servers will now be switched over to WebAssembly. Facebook is only looking at changing their website for the parts of the website that are the slowest and cause the most strain on the website. They're not looking at it to solve everything. They're not looking to refactor their entire code base in Rust and WebAssembly, and that sucks for us, because it was this act of using dynamically typed scripting languages and only optimizing towards just-in-time, optimization that led to a world in which Moore's Law was a thing, and yet, it didn't feel like it was a thing.